Are we recording? Is this thing on?
Yes, it is. Welcome to RevOps 500, where we invite the world's top marketers to answer the tough questions facing growing organizations.
Ooh, sounds important.
I'm Sajeel Qureshi.
And I'm Gil Bates. Join us as we dive deep into the world of RevOps.
We'll be learning strategies and expertise from first-hand experience. RevOps 500 is sponsored by Computan. They provide technical and development expertise to growth-focused marketing teams.
Let's get started.
Today we have an extremely special guest for you guys to listen to. I'm very excited to be talking to him. He's a branding expert. He's a marketer, keynote speaker, mentor, team player. He's very, very tenacious if you get to know him. He's very technical, and yeah, he's an extremely hard worker. He's also the CMO of Agorapulse. His name is Darryl Praill. Nice to meet you, Darryl.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
On the show, Darryl. Darryl, so anyways, why don't we get started right into it? So Darryl, what is one RevOps myth that you have?
Okay. So you see, folks, if you wonder if this was live, you heard me go, that was me thinking about it. So here we go. The one RevOps myth I have, and I'll be curious your reaction to this, because it's not something I hear talked about a lot, but it's what I've lived. What I've lived is that RevOps is they're a service bureau, for lack of a better word, where they're there to support, sales and marketing, hence revenue. But so the customers of RevOps, the leaders of sales, the leaders of marketing, assume that RevOps understands business, understands how marketing works, understands how sales works, understands how sales reps can game the system, can avoid work. And they assume that RevOps has the ability to be constantly looking for areas of concern or areas that could be optimized, improved upon. But for them to do that, they need to understand the roles of sales and marketing. And often they don't, which means the myth is people think RevOps have the skills to help you optimize your operations, and often they don't. I believe that's a myth.
So you're saying that they don't have the skills to optimize sales and marketing?
I am saying that, I'll give you a classic example. Think about how RevOps is typically organized, right? Typically someone comes into RevOps either from a marketing side, maybe they're a marketing automation expert, or a sales side, they're a CRM expert, and they realize, I like this job. Maybe I'm a former marketer, maybe I'm a former sales rep, and I do a career shift, and now I'm in RevOps. And this is, woohoo, I love it. It's great, okay? Yeah, so I'll use the example of that marketer that comes into RevOps. Does that marketer understand the sales rep and how they're going to game the opportunities? They don't. Right. But they're in RevOps, and so we're going to go to RevOps, and they're going to say, tell me what my reps are doing wrong. Tell me where I need to optimize. Tell me who's performing ideally. Tell me what the average, how do we compare? Like what are the best reports? Can you give me classic requests? Can you give me some killer reports that really help me identify the performance of my team with, of course, minimal direction? Because if we had it, we would tell you what we want, but we don't, because we think you have that expertise and you've seen it all. And can you bring to the table? But that person came into the world from a marketing angle and they don't know a clue about sales.
Right. So that's an interesting point. So then, if you have sales that's coming into RevOps, they don't understand the marketing side, but the marketing person comes into RevOps, they don't understand the sales side. So how do you get around that? How do you squash the myth, I guess you could say, in practicality?
Squash. I mean, to me, it always comes back into hiring a RevOps leader who has done some shape and form, both disciplines, or you get a leader within the organization who's willing to mentor that leader. In other words, a sales leader or a marketing leader. The challenge with that, so candidly, most RevOps professionals learn this over time. So that marketer that came into RevOps over the next 3, 4, or 5 years will be exposed to sales reps gaming the system over and over again and finally realize and learn what to look for. But until they have that experience, or if you have a young RevOps team or you have a small RevOps team, that's the risk you run. So the RevOps leadership need to be very active. The RevOps leadership need to do a self-critical assessment whether they have the skills And if not, they need to consult with the head of sales or the head of marketing to do that. So that's it. But I do have a second myth that I do want to, can I float a second myth? All right.
Well, that's a huge violation of podcast policy.
I know it
We'll
is.
let it slide for you, Darryl.
That's okay. I asked permission. So the second myth I have is that RevOps implement the best systems and tech to meet the needs of their circumstances. That's a myth. RevOps, 8 times out of 10, implement the tech that they themselves are biased towards. And no, you got it. So classic case, I see this over and over again. Maybe you're a HubSpot shop and the sales team says, you know what we need? We need a sequencing tool, a cadence tool. And based on their circumstances, maybe the best tool is Outreach or SalesLoft or VanillaSoft. Instead, they say, let's use HubSpot sequences because it works for them. And then the clients, sales or marketing, just assume that that's the best tool for them. They've consulted them, they've included them, and they assume that was the right choice. Over and over again, I see that mistake too. So the myth is that they provide the best tools for the organization. That's a myth. They often provide the best tools that fits within their comfort zone.
Got it. So it's almost like what you're saying is that these guys, these RevOps people cannot play any kind of a guitar. They have to play a guitar that like a guitar brand that they like. They can play like a guitar which is not theirs. If they're Salesforce engineers, like for RevOps, they're going to want to pull out HubSpot and put Salesforce in. They're HubSpot people.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that's uniform across the board. Remember, the conversation here is myths, right? Sure. So if I look at the underlying, root cause of those myths, to me, it's exactly what you just said.
And what do you think about so let's talk about this music analogy with HubSpot and CRMs or whatever. Sure. Obviously in music, or in most skills, you hear tone is in the fingers, right? Like, Jimi Hendrix sounds like Jimi Hendrix, regardless of what he's playing. Could be a toy guitar, could be a Les Paul guitar, could be any guitar. Yep. But is it the same case in RevOps? Is tone in the fingers for RevOps engineers, you think?
Oh, that's a deep question, dude. Nobody's ever even remotely asked a question like that. Yeah, I think it is. Honestly, I mean, it's no different. I think it applies across all disciplines, right? If people would look at my marketing in my last job and look at my marketing in the current job and say, you're the same marketer, your videos, your posts, they look and they smell like Darryl. They haven't changed because you're a different job. You may be talking about different items because, you sell to a different audience or you have different product to offer, but it's still distinctly you. And I think RevOps is the exact same way, totally the exact same, which by the way, is a really cool thing because if you've got great tone, you're going to be in demand.
Interesting. So yeah, you feel that if you're good in one set of tools, you could be good in any set of tools. It just depends
I
on
absolutely do. The biggest thing I see is fear, right? Like I've witnessed this over and over again, where how do I put this? Well, it's not. I'm gonna go down that road. I do believe. I just don't think everybody in RevOps have enough faith in themselves, right? So because it's very comfortable. If I'm good at Salesforce, I always want to put Salesforce in because I just know it, and it allows me to get to the end. Often it's the right decision because if we're on a timeline, it allows me to get to the right to our end game, our end goals faster because I know it. But if the company already has, so if you join the company and they're a HubSpot shop at Salesforce.com. This is where I see conflict, where people, they would rather just rip out HubSpot because HubSpot doesn't do it like Salesforce did it. Well, guess what? No, it doesn't do it like Salesforce did it, but the concepts are the same. And by the way, HubSpot does things that are in some regards, but in some ways better than what Salesforce does. So, every tool's got strengths and weaknesses, but you're the professional. You're the one that needs to adapt. Again, I'll use me as an example just because it's easy to pick on myself. My last job, I was selling a sales tech tool to a sales audience. In this job, I'm selling a marketing tech tool to a marketing audience. Completely different. It's like comparing Salesforce versus HubSpot, but I'm still a marketer. And all the core strengths and knowledge and acumen and experience I have applies. but I needed to invest time up front to adjust and figure out my new product and my new audience. And admittedly, that first week, first month, first quarter in the job, I'll tell you, I did not know what the hell I was doing because I was so rapidly learning. And that was learning, the environment as opposed to my marketing knowledge didn't disappear on me. So it's the same in RevOps. Your RevOps knowledge, how things work, what a pipeline looks like, what the standard reports are looking like, none of that changes.
Got it. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. And let's talk about some challenges you're facing. I'm obviously, you've been a marketing leader in multiple companies. I mean, there's probably a lot of things that you see history repeating itself over and over and over again sometimes. What is a challenge that you face now that's maybe keeping you up at night a little bit? I know not much probably keeps you up at night, but if you can think of something marketing related, what would it be?
So marketing, not RevOps
or RevOps? RevOps related. Sorry, RevOps related.
RevOps. It's okay. Just want to make sure that one. Yeah, I can tell you, I can totally tell you what keeps me up at night on the RevOps side, which is how do I put this succinctly? A very explicitly defined buying process that is documented, and I want to start high and go low. That is documented, from the buyer's journey, from the first time they sniff us, see us, visit us, to the time they physically, ink the deal and the sales off the deal is closed or lost. That whole journey has to be documented and agreed to between the whole revenue stakeholders, so typically marketing and sales. What happens if they go to sign up, if there's a free trial, what do the forms look like? What are the drop-down values? Are we cleansing that with a Clearbit or a Zoom Info? Or are we going to explicitly ask those values ourselves? Do we then, enroll that into a sequence, or do we flip it to a sales exec or an AE or an SDR? What are the rules of when we flip, do we allocate to whom, right? Is it based on revenue? Is it based on ideal customer profile? So it is incredibly granular, right? To the point of timing. If I'm sending them, they sign up for a free trial and I'm sending them all these sequence messages, our product does A, next email, our product does B, next email, our product does C. But all of a sudden, they hit a certain threshold of they look like they're a great fit, or they're all over our site, or they're really using our product. And now the rep is involved. Well, if the rep emails them, but they're getting this product free trial nurture email, are we spamming them? And then the product itself is sending them notifications, and now they're getting overwhelmed. So you got to think about all of those touch points. And then, so this is me transitioning from high to low. Does the tech stack manage all that? Does it make sure that we have checks and balances? It unsubscribes them from one sequence when they enter another sequence. Does it have intelligent routing rules when they finally get into the AE's bucket to pursue and they're having conversations? Is it making sure that all the checks and balances are there along the way, that you can't go from an initial call to a proposal without disco being qualification or disco taking place, or multi-threading taking place on the opportunity? So are all the checks and balances there? So I document it down to that. And I find over and over and over again, that is missed because no one wants to get that granular or understands it across the whole journey. And RevOps is the center of the universe. They are the owner of that journey because they take the stakeholders, marketing, sales, the executive team, whomever, and they make sure it all happens. And it keeps me up at night because at the end of the day, as a marketer, my job is to show an ROI on the spend I've made to drive new business. And I worry and I see firsthand how many leads are being wasted because we're not touching them, or we touch them too late, or we're not, oh, this is a high value opportunity, we just let it continue to nurture as opposed to sending it to a rep. Or it's a great lead, but we didn't multi-thread it. And then because we didn't multi-thread it, a 2-seat deal could have been a 20-seat deal. And all that comes back to me when they say, how much revenue did you drive, Darryl? So for me, the whole buyer's journey is what keeps me awake at night because I know I'm just bleeding money.
So when it comes to something like the buyer's journey and optimizing for it, how do you solve a problem like that? I mean, how do you turn that sleepless night into a sleepful night?
There is, I wish there was a secret sauce
Yeah.
answer that I
Is
could
it
give you. I'll give you the generic one, but I can't, even though it's generic, this is so emphatically true. You need to have all of the stakeholders. And what I've learned together and aligned, and what I've learned over time, this has just been my experience, is that if your stakeholders are distributed, because so many of us work from home, we're in different locations, it is worth all the gold, at Fort Knox to fly everybody in and have a face-to-face whiteboard, document this, and have very clearly defined takeaways. Doing, 2, 3, 4, 8-hour sessions on Zoom is good, but people still multitask. They still get distracted. They're still responding to the important messages. Lock them up in a room, fly them all into one place. That is huge. And I've learned that by making those very mistakes.
Got it. So just getting really, up close and personal with the problem, with the people involved. That's what you
Yes.
feel like is the best way to do it. Yeah,
Yes.
that's
And the other thing you need to have,
probably true.
you got to make sure that this sounds stupid, but you got to make sure that the power dynamic is balanced. So I'll give you a simple example. If you've got a very agreeable marketing leader and you've got a very driven, strong sales leader, then what will tend to happen is the process will be overwhelmed by the needs of sales and it will not meet the needs of marketing, right? So again, you've got to make sure that you've got ground rules in place that everybody gets an equal voice and there's no overwhelming. And there's got to be a little bit of management involved with those personalities, and someone has to be designated the individual to do that. So these are all human nature issues, but it's critical.
Yeah. And is this how you solve this problem when you're optimizing for hours? You get everybody in a room and you whiteboard the whole thing up?
Yes. And I hate it because, like in my case, my head office, I'm personally located in Ottawa, Canada, but my head office is in Paris, France. So for me to go and it's like, it's a process. I have to go and have multiple connections and I have to fly there and it's hotels and it's time changes and there you go. But the reality is it is the best thing possible. And this is what people need to forget, because we will sometimes make these decisions on a short-sighted basis, like, oh, I don't want to travel. Can't we just use Zoom? And then all of a sudden a quarter or 2 or 3 goes by and we're missing our numbers because the process is still broken. Right? Whereas if I would have taken that time out of my schedule, I would have been having much better results. I would be hitting my bonuses on my variable compensation. I would be hiring more people. We'd be hitting our numbers and growing. I'd be getting pay raises, all because of that. It sounds stupid, but that's the honest to God truth. I've seen it happen over and over again.
And how long do these sessions last? Are they like hours? Are they days? Are they weeks? I mean, how long are you there for? How long are the sessions?
If you're going to do the whole, journey, as I described, you're going to be locked up with a bunch of people in a room 8 hours a day for probably 3 to 5 days. And that'll be enough to document the high level process, right? Now you still have to come back and implement it, but at least you have walked through all of the what ifs, all of the scenarios. Basically, think of it, all the branches. If this happens, we go here. Think about all of our mural boards, right? And you have the decision. Do they fill out this field? Yes, no. What are the branches? All that logic. You have to map. You have to walk through it. And it's amazing how when you do that, there's so many things you don't think about initially until you're forced to do that, because you think it's obvious. And then somebody else in the team says, and this is what I see happen all the time. Oh, but we, we don't do that. We do this. And you're like, what? I didn't know we did that. And so there's a lot of tribal knowledge that's in the organization. And when you have people on that revenue team coming to their document the journey, some will be there for 3 months, some will be there for 30 years. I'm exaggerating. But with that, you start to uncover all of the legacy decisions that were made that are now influencing your buyer's journey and what happens or what doesn't happen, or why you can do something or why you can't do something. And so you need them all together and to bounce off of each other.
Okay, so now, Darryl, we've talked about the present functions of RevOps. What do you think the future of it holds?
Oh, very, very good days for RevOps. So there was a time, I'm now, because I can say this because I have white hair and I'm old. There was a time when in the early days, when I was selling enterprise deals, whether I was in marketing or sales, that we couldn't get a deal done without the CIO or the CTO or the head of IT being in the room, because they had to give their blessing. And then time went on, and then all of a sudden you have SaaS, and all of a sudden everybody, it was the wild, wild west. Anybody could go sign up for a subscription, and then you came, tech stack hell, and the company subscriptions on a monthly basis went through the roof, and it was out of control. And then slowly, but nobody wanted to own anything. And eventually marketers started owning, the CRM and the marketing automation, and slowly they became marketing ops, and you had sales ops. And then they coalesce now into RevOps, often not always, but often still resides under marketing. But they are now, the head of RevOps is often at every single executive meeting or leadership meeting. So for the future, we're going back to the future, where RevOps has a seat at the executive table. They don't report to sales. They don't report to marketing. They are the neutral arbiter, reporting up to either a president or a CEO or a COO. Maybe even on a remote cases, sometimes a CFO. And they are, again, becoming the gatekeeper to make sure that whatever we invest in fits in with our IT platform, fits in with our security requirements, fits in with our data and privacy requirements. So we are back to the future. And if you're in RevOps, it is a good time for you, because compensation for quality people will only increase, and your authority and influence will only increase. That's my view of what's happening in the world. Would you agree? I see you nodding your head. Is that a good thing?
I mean, I see we're seeing a lot of these CRO roles come in, right? Chief Revenue Officer, which, I mean, it's not really a sales role. It's not really a marketing role. It is really the combination of sales, marketing, customer success, those sorts of things. I mean, so I think the future that you're predicting is kind of the present now. It already is.
Well, it isn't. It isn't, because I see it. So I was just the CRO at my last gig at VanillaSoft for 5 years, and I owned. In fact, you'll love this story. So I was the CMO, and when they approached me about a year and a half in, if I was interested in the CRO role, which, to your point, would own all of sales, all of marketing, I had a condition, and I said, I'll do it on condition of two things. And they said, what's that? I said, one, I get to build a sales enablement team to coach and develop the sales reps. And they said, okay. And I said, two, we create a dedicated RevOps team. We had sales ops and we had marketing ops, and they were in the respective divisions. And I said, and I own that. I own all of revenue ops, and there will be more tech investment. And they said, done. So that was a condition of me becoming a CRO. So my point being here is, that was a condition, because that's how critical it was to me being successful as a CRO. I did have that span of control across all the organizations on the buyer's journey, as you said, but there are too many companies out there that when you say CRO, all that is they gave a senior sales leader, who might have been a VP, a better title, because they didn't want to pay him more money. But hey, we'll make you a C level instead of a V level, but you're still just running sales. And I see that over and over and over again. But you're right. As the CRO role evolves to what it's destined to be, that is absolutely it. The challenge is this, and I've had so many recruiters approach me over and over again, and they say, Darryl, you've been a head of marketing, you've been a head of sales, that person to fill the CRO role who truly has in-depth experience of both of those disciplines, that's like finding a unicorn. There are very few people out there who have that experience, which is ironic, because what did we say when we started off here about the myth? There's very few actual RevOps people who know all the disciplines. Yeah,
it's a very interesting conundrum.
It's a challenge, and it's an opportunity.
It's a very big challenge. It's a very big challenge. I mean, so, like, I mean, this is like, you have a lot of wisdom and knowledge about this stuff. I mean, how did you get into the world of marketing and RevOps and sales? I mean, you've crossed those divides several times throughout your career. I mean, can you take us back to little Darryl? I mean, and kind of how you got into this whole thing?
Yeah, I can actually. The answer is really simple when I explain it, and it's almost obvious. So, little Darryl began life as a computer programmer, as a coder. And after doing that, and actually when he finished university, he was tired of coding. He'd been coding all through high school, university, and he was tired of it. And he was like, I don't want to do this. So his first job was, what do I do if I'm a degree coder who doesn't want to code? Well, what everybody else says, go into sales. So I sold photocopiers for 6 months, door to door. So boys and girls listening, that's me wearing a suit in those days and walking on strip malls and industrial parks and walking up to the greasy mechanic and saying, hey, buddy, do you want to buy this photocopier? Talk about learning rejection in a hurry. I did that for 6 months. And then I said, okay, I suck at this, but I learned a lot. And I went back to coding, and I coded for 6 or 7 years. And what happened was over that time was I got more and more of what I like to describe, maybe this is not politically correct, but attention deficit challenge, right? In other words, in the early days, I used to love spending 8, 12, 14 hours a day in front of the screen. But as time went on and I was getting older and more mature, I could do 2 or 3 hours. And then I was like, my mind was wandering. And so what I needed more challenging. I needed more people interaction because I was growing into myself. So what I figured out was I could, because I had a little bit of sales background and I had the technical background, I actually went and worked for, because before I was working for insurance companies, what have you, I went and worked for a tech company because I knew some tech and in a pre-sales role. And from pre-sales, they said, hey, you're pretty good. You want to do product management? And I said, sure. I had no idea what that was. I did product management. And they said, hey, you're pretty good. Now we need to market what you've just built. You want to go into product marketing? And I said, sure. So I did product marketing. And then I said, I kind of like this. And so from there, I just went into marketing. And then I went back and forth with sales and marketing. So it's because I'm technical and had a technical background that I understand the tech behind RevOps. And I understand sales and marketing, and I understand my buyer. But that's why I'm a coder by trade who got bored coding.
And look, I mean, I'm a coder, coding company, those kind of things. I'm not bored of it yet, but maybe one day.
Well, that's why I was a huge fan of marketing automation when it came out, because I'm like, this is epic. I can just make landing pages and campaigns and emails, and it's all WYSIWYG. Like for me, I was in heaven. I was Marketo customer number 40. I mean,
Wow.
I was an early adopter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I could see the power of it, right? And you learn. So there you go.
And is there like a particular mentor of yours who got you from coding to marketing, who said that we don't want you to be in product management anymore, we want you to be in marketing now? Was that kind of a person who was a tipping point, or no, there is nobody? Oh, wow. Interesting.
No, but hear me out. So the answer was no to the question you asked, but yes, there was a mentor. And I'm laughing as I think about it, because the mentor was actually a former chief technology officer. But what the mentor did for me, because I've had a reasonably good career, and I came into executive roles through luck fairly fast. But I didn't know what it meant to be an executive, right? So yeah, I had the coding. Yeah, I had marketing. Yeah, I had sales, but I had never been an executive. And I would go into meetings all the time, and I would have these fantastic ideas. And by the way, they were pretty good ideas. And I get shot down. And then he would come into the meetings, and he'd have this idea, and everybody would like high five him. I'm like, yeah. And I finally one day lost it. I went to him and I said, how the hell do you get your ideas blessed all the time, and I get shot down all the time, right? Like, what is going on? And so he was a mentor, and he started laughing at me, and he goes, Darryl, I'll teach you how to be an executive. And the first thing he taught me, which by the way, applies today still dramatically, but especially for anybody in RevOps, was this. He goes, when you go to an executive meeting, which is no different than anybody in RevOps, people in RevOps, you're herding cats, because you have to get the salespeople and the marketing people and the executives, and they all have opinions, and they never agree, and they're strong personalities. How do you do that? And it's the same as an executive, because you have the exact same people, but now they have bigger titles and bigger salaries and bigger egos and whatnot. He said, Darryl, you go into the meeting thinking that that's the meeting. He goes, that's not the meeting. He goes, when I go into the meeting, I have gone to every single one of you one-on-one, and I've done the following. I've said, hey, I've got this idea. Just want to bounce it off you. What do you think? And we think you're, it's you, he's saying to me, you think I'm confiding and bouncing something off of you. And you give me your feedback, and it's really interesting. 80% of what you gave me, I already thought about. 20%, it's interesting. I'll take, a few bits from your new pieces of information. But I do that to every single executive. And so when I go and present it, it looks like I'm presenting it for the first time at that executive meeting. And when I lay it all out, every single one of you can identify your contributions. And so you're all advocating for me, but you already knew it was coming. And therefore you all say yes. And I'm like, holy shit. And what he taught me was how to build consensus. And building consensus is at the core, the foundation of getting any project to completion, which is what RevOps is all about, right? How many times does the CEO or the CFO said, we need to do this? And then they look at RevOps. It's all about building consensus and working with stakeholders. So yeah, I had a mentor. He taught me how to be an executive. He taught me how to build consensus and collaborate and get my way. So, he was a chief technology officer. He was phenomenal.
So back channeling a little bit, talking to some people
Yes.
one-on-one, and then bringing them into a meeting. And then, yeah, it's an interesting way of doing it. Very common and simple, but it's something we don't think about in a marketing context or in a specific context like that.
Well, especially if you come up on a RevOps, you tend to be you have this customer service mentality. Go make that landing page. Okay. Go create this campaign. Okay. Go make that report. Okay. So you're very much responding to the task, but now all of a sudden you have to go and actually you have an initiative that someone gives you and you have to go build consensus. That is new turf for you. And there's gonna be money involved, and you're gonna anger somebody because you're gonna recommend A, but they really want it B. So building consensus is a skill that we just don't teach people. And it's critical to any kind of career progression, but especially in RevOps because it spans so many stakeholders.
Yeah, and you have all these dependent variables. You can't do anything really on your own. You need buy-in from sales, marketing, customer success, whomever.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
And so say something like building consensus. If you were to go back in time to young Darryl, was that something you would teach him at an earlier age if you could? Or is there something else you would teach yourself at an earlier age that's more important for your role now that you can think of?
So I would definitely teach them at an earlier age because that's a life skill, which is ironic. It's not just a work skill; it is a life skill. Whether you're trying to do a recreational soccer or hockey league, and you're working with all these parents and coaches and the associations. You got to build consensus, etc. Right? So that's a life skill. But the other thing I would teach Darryl at a much younger age is to have confidence in themselves. The biggest thing is two things I've learned. One, I've learned personally to have confidence in yourself. So long story short, I had a bad boss in an early job. The very, very first time I was on a full-fledged marketing manager, gave me zero input. And I felt lost. And I got so frustrated. I got to a tipping point, a breaking point where I finally said, screw it. I'm going to get fired. So if I'm going to get fired, I want to be able to leave the job with my head held high, knowing I did what I thought was right. So I just started making decisions without waiting for approval or sign off from the boss. And they loved me and I got a massive raise afterwards. But I had to get to that tipping point to believe in myself. That was the number one thing that I've learned at a younger age. At your core, you probably are right. Have faith in yourself. All right, that's the first part. Second thing I've learned as a parent and as a boss, really as a parent, as my kids are now 26 and 28, they're in the workforce. And they're not new in the workforce. They've been in the workforce for, a handful of years, maybe 5-6 years now. And they don't teach people about managers and how managers, their bosses think. And I've had my kids come to me over and over again, and they were frustrated with their bosses and they were just ready to quit their job. And they didn't know what to do. And they were seeking my opinion, which I love. They sought my opinion. And this is what nobody taught me that I would teach young Darryl because I'm teaching my kids. I would say to them, no, I said, the manager hired you for a reason. I said, they believe in you. I said, you may not like what they're doing, but they may not be aware of it. I said, I would rather you come to me as your boss and say, professionally, respectfully, this is my explicit, abrupt, unvarnished concern and challenge and frustration. How can we fix this? As opposed to you quitting. And I said to them, trust me, they won't be upset. 9 times out of 10, they won't be upset because remember, they hired you. They want to keep you happy. You're an investment. They just are. And when I watch my kids over and over again, take my advice every single time, they're shocked. Now they understand it. People don't teach young, new career people how to deal with managers. And I'm telling you this, your manager's not trying to be an idiot. They're probably just unaware. And if you're respectful, the classic line I taught my kids works like gold is simply to say, I'm new, I'm young. Can you help me understand why you made this decision? Can you help me understand? That's not an attack. Now that leads to a conversation because they can say, well, why are you asking? Well, this is what I've noticed. This is my concern. And they'll say, oh, that's not what I meant. Oh, I didn't know that. And you'll get resolution. So young Darryl, teaching people, build consensus, teaching how to engage and manage their boss in a constructive way, and overcoming that fear.
Yeah, manage the boss. I like that one.
Manage the you boys and girls. You always manage up. You always manage. I proactively. My boss is the CEO. I proactively communicate with him on a regular basis, and I want to be clear on something. That includes when I'm struggling, when I'm missing deadlines, when I have issues. It's much. Go back to our parents. Our parents would have said, "And when I find out that you broke this, I am angry." Would I have been angry if you'd have told me? Yes, but I would have been less angry.
Yeah.
Right? Or less frustrated because you weren't trying to hide it. You weren't trying to avoid it. And then we can deal
That's
with
honesty
it.
too.
It's honesty.
Honest.
People are people. At the end of the day, we're all just little boys and girls.
Exactly. Honesty is a big thing.
Yep.
All right. So Darryl, you're a really interesting guy. I mean, like, what are you doing outside work? I know you said you had a couple of kids. I mean, family. What are you doing for fun these days?
I'm boring. I have a gadget, a fetish where I if it's new and it's electronic, I have to buy it and try it, and my wife hates it. You talk about me being coder. I am reliving my youth, so I've been buying a number of electronic games and whatnot that I grew up with. But I just recently I went and rebought my first ever computers. For those of you, most people won't recognize this, but in 1980, my first computer that cost me 400 Canadian dollars was a Texas Instruments TI 994A.
Oh yeah.
There we go, right? And it had Sprint graphics, which was 32-bit back then. So I just bought one on eBay for like $72 American. Picked that up. It's mint condition. So I'm going to go and play and, go back to my coding roots in TI Basic and just have some fun just for me. I know, just, those kind of things. I like to putter. I'm a news junkie. I love the news. My wife hates that about me. My Twitter handle is opinionated, which is very true. I like to think respectfully, but yeah, I like to opine on what's going on in the world. But for the most part, I'm a family guy. I'm introverted, and despite what you see here when I'm on air, and I like just to hang out with the family. I got a wonderful a standard Schnauzer dog named Velvet. We do she and my wife and I, we do a lot of camping when it's a little warmer here in Canada. So we're big campers. Which is, again, camping for us is like the anti-technology, right? We're back in nature, we're with water and trees and trails and anything not digital. So, I'm just at that point. I'm not that most interesting, but, just enough to, scratch an itch.
Well, I mean, you sound interesting to me for sure.
Oh, you're nice. You're polite.
Well, I mean, look, Darryl, thanks for coming on the show and just jamming with us a little bit about RevOps. It's been like a huge thrill to talk with you. I mean, you have a lot of different types of skills, abilities, perspectives, which are very, very unique in the RevOps world because it's a very new field, but you have been doing this for a very long time. You're a technical person. Our listeners are going to benefit a lot from you being here. So thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, and guys, that's our show. Thanks for listening to another episode of RevOps 500. Again, if you like the show, if you laughed a little bit about it, please tell someone about the podcast. Darryl, quick thanks again to you. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks so much.
And that wraps up another episode of RevOps 500. Thanks for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at RevOps500.com. RevOps 500 is sponsored by CompuTech, providing technical and development expertise to growth-focused marketing.